tune is Echo. The name of the band is the Autumn Kings. I am your host, Larry V. For this, the maiden recording of the podcast, The Nitty Gritty, where we will attempt to do just that. Get to the nitty gritty of all of the good things and all of the good people in the world. And if we happen to stumble upon them, perhaps some of the not so good things and not so good people around the world. But today, for the maiden recording, we have a couple of the very good and talented people of the world. We have Jake Diab and we have Joe Coccimiglio.
Got it.
From the Autumn Kings. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you.
Great to be
How are you?
Doing great. Congrats on the new podcast.
This is awesome.
We're rocking and rolling. Never been better.
Awesome. You know, I feel really fortunate to have you guys sort of as the conduit into this world that I'm not accustomed to. Hopefully, I can pick up a couple of things from your greatness. Sure, it's like sitting in the midst
So
of MJ or other legends, but you guys are certainly legends, certainly in Southwestern Ontario, and I know you're working really hard to even go beyond that. And we'll get into the music and your incredibly vast CV, and it's almost, speaking of the CV, it almost doesn't reconcile to me when I look at the body of work and I look at you guys. You guys are still very young people, and please don't take this the wrong way. You're in your mid-20s, you're in your early 20s, and it's been an incredible journey. We'll get into all that, but first I just want to ask you, we're in the midst of this COVID craziness, and I just wanted to get your sense of this last 6 to 8 weeks for each of you. Has it been a reflective period? Has it been a creative period? How have you guys been keeping busy and sort of looking forward?
I honestly, I think it's a little bit of both. Like creatively, we're working as hard as when we're together. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's FaceTime calls. There's writing on our own. There's still schedule to get music going.
Yeah,
on
it's
our
been
end.
a big adjustment process because writing online is a lot different than writing in person and having those spontaneous moments come to life. So we've had to adjust. I'd say it's about 10% less effective working through FaceTime, but it turns out that we're sort of learning that it's a new avenue we can use if we're ever remote in different spots.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's also a reflective time, man. Like I think for everybody, everyone's really sitting back because they're not working.
Yeah.
They're with their family. They're seeing, you're kind of seeing what's important and what's not, right?
It's very interesting. And I know, just thinking about my own sort of how I have evolved into a listener of music and sort of understand it. I know some of the post-World War II austere times when things weren't that great, that spawned an entire explosion of music, especially out of the British Isles, the Beatles and Stones and so on. It's an incredible time. So I wonder, do you guys given any thought about the future, about how this will affect the recording and production of music?
I think so. At least personally, sitting in a basement in isolation, having no really sense of, social conduct with anybody else has forced me to think about lyrics and music from a totally new perspective. I've been doing a lot more writing, as Joe's been saying, and I think subconsciously when writing lyrics, it's going to come out a little bit differently and it's going to be influenced by the current circumstances of the world.
Totally.
I really think so.
Well, they say usually bands, they write songs about the road, right? How many songs have you heard about the road or love and stuff like that? Now we're in such a new situation. It's like, what song's going to come out of this?
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Yeah. And the other thing is, just to what you were saying, Jake, just now, that you've had to evolve your creative process. Talk about the creative process a little bit. Give me an insight on how it works from project to project. Is it sort of the same framework, the same approach? Do you we talk about the nitty gritty? Is there a legal pad next to your bed? Do you write things down? Do you wake up in the middle of the night? How does it work for you guys?
Man, all the time, Joe.
Tell
us.
Legal pad. I think our notes apps and our voice apps are open constantly.
Yeah.
That is the new process.
The two apps on your phone, the notes app, I'm not sure if
those
you're familiar.
voicemail apps,
people watching
like
this will know, and the voice memo app where you can pull out your phone, and if you spontaneously get an idea, you can record it then and there on your phone.
Yeah.
So that if 10 minutes later you want to go back and reference what your inspiration was, you have that there in tangible format. But as for the process, we started off this band with a very trial and error approach to making music. I'd be sitting back with a guitar like this and just humming words that almost sound like gibberish until something clicks and one word sticks out that we accidentally said, and from there we'd end up building an entire track from it. Now we sort of approach it a little bit differently, where back then we used to start with guitar riffs and the vocals were almost a means of servicing a guitar riff. Now we write with an acoustic guitar and we write vocals first and lyrics first.
Yes.
If the lyrics and vocals sound first, then we take it from there.
And obviously back then, and how long are we talking? We're talking about 5 years ago. And back then there wasn't anybody sort of guiding that process for you guys. You guys were sort of figuring it out by yourself. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Totally.
Right. Absolutely. You know, that's the hardest part. You know, I'm a guitarist and I love music like Metallica, and I also like guys like Eminem. And I try to just emulate that, and I love the technical prowess that both of those artists kind of had, but I never really looked at music through the lens of songwriting and writing great songs the way the Beatles did until probably 2 years ago. Before, it was almost a necessity to being in a band. Oh yeah, we're supposed to have original music that we play.
Yep.
But really, I just wanted to play music and sort of show off our technical capabilities. So it's interesting to see how the mentality has shifted as we've gotten to learn a bit about the business, how it works, what it really takes to be in a successful band.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And interesting, that's a great segue, Jake, into my next question, or the next topic I wanted to talk about. You guys have chosen, you probably unwittingly back in the day, you guys have chosen a notorious fucking industry. Yeah. I mean, you talk about through the grinder, this industry puts people through the grinder. And I'm talking
daily.
my arm's length knowledge of this industry. You don't have to be a genius to figure out it grinds people up and it spits them out at a rate. I'm not sure there's another industry like it.
Absolutely.
I'm not just, you talk about the corpses, you know, and all the beautiful and great musicians that have, you know, lost their life, unfortunately, economic ruins, personal ruins.
Sure.
It list goes.
Absolutely.
How does that affect you? Do you even think about, is that even a thought in your, like, what am I up against here? Does that really?
That's totally fair. And everything you said is true. And it's, I think, the most competitive industry in the world, bar none. There's so much talent out there, and it's quite the small industry. I think when we started this band and we were just getting to know each other, me, Joe, Tibor, we really thought about, okay, is anybody going to be addicted to drugs, and are we going to have another Kurt Cobain situation or Amy Winehouse situation where that can happen down the road? First, you have to make it, which is hard enough as is, and we're still ramping up and we're getting there. But we knew from the very beginning that we had a good group of guys that weren't going to get caught up in that stuff. We're grounded, we have good family life, and we always ran it through the lens of entrepreneurship. And I think approaching it that way is something most bands, especially Axl Rose and Slash back in the day, they had the sheer talent, but I don't think they were looking at it like, I better manage my money once I get successful. Like,
better not drink this bottle of tequila,
right?
You know.
Yeah. And with us, you know, thankfully we're not 16 or 18 years old when we're making it, like Bieber, where you get the keys to the kingdom prematurely, and all of a sudden you don't know who your real friends and fake friends are. You can't trust people on the business side of things. The fans worship you like you're a god. I could really see that twisting people. But now we've grown just enough so that we've got the battle scars and we've done the tours and other things like that, where when that big moment comes, I think we're all prepared and mature enough to take it.
Yeah. And in the lead up to the podcast here, I did some prep work. I did a lot of prep work. I actually spoke to half a dozen people about you guys and your work and dealing with you. And I'm sure that shouldn't, I hope that doesn't surprise you. But the number one thing, every single person when I asked them, you know, just talk to me about the Autumn Kings, every single person, the first thing out of their mouth was the hardest working people that I've ever dealt with.
That was very kind of them.
Appreciate
that. Absolutely. And I guess, you know, to that end, I guess I'll start with an analogy, and maybe you guys can talk about what you think. Jake, you just mentioned that the business is challenging and you've run into some challenges. We were shooting the shit before we started here about the Last Dance documentary, the Michael Jordan documentary, which is really fascinating. And one of the things that stuck out to me, with all the accomplishments that Michael Jordan achieved and the greatness and the acclaim and fortune, he says that the challenges or the failures are much more vivid to him in his mind than any of the successes. And that's to me, that's quite something to say for a guy of his caliber.
Right.
You guys have certainly had some setbacks and some challenges. is it like, do they keep you going, those challenges? Do they drive you to be perfectionists and to?
Oh, I think they add gas to the fire every time. Absolutely.
There's an analogy to be drawn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think 100%. I think with guys like Michael Jordan, the reason they've gotten to that level of success and they're such high performers is because there's this little voice in the back of their head that keeps telling them, you're not just good enough yet. Even though they are, even though the statistics show that. And I think if that part of them was lost, then they'd all of a sudden start falling down the ladder and somebody else would take their spot as king. So I think for him, the challenges are fair. Like you said, it's the gas, it's fueling him. But I also think in many respects, that's the one thing where if you didn't have those challenges and setbacks, you would just end up going down the tubes and you wouldn't be anybody.
Yeah, I suppose they spur your growth.
For sure. It's supposed to hurt, right? Like the losses, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, even right now with coronavirus, it's a perfect example. You know, I'll share something that is sort of top secret, but we'll have it for the podcast.
Okay.
You know, there's not, and hopefully I'm not jumping the gun here, but there hasn't been any touring, right? That is probably the last thing. Touring and sports games are the last thing that's going to come back from all this.
Huge gatherings.
So our business is really, really hurting badly. Well, what that's forced us to do, and the frustration that I felt going, I can't just sit here in the basement feeling like a victim writing music, and besides that going, well, where do we turn? So we've pivoted and we've started finding some new opportunities in the TV and film world where we're talking to TV shows, movies, and video games about getting our songs placed in there. And that's something that I never would have thought of if it weren't for this crazy world circumstance forcing me to think creatively as to how I can move this band forward and move this business forward in these times of distress. So I think that's one thing, just like to go back to the Michael Jordan analogy, feeling that pain and feeling that you're not good enough, you have to think of some way to rise to the top somehow. Yeah. And I think that's what sticks in his mind so much because he thinks hard on those times and learns how to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. The struggle makes you look at it from a different perspective, right? If there was one way to make it in this industry, we'd be doing that right now. But there's a million ways, right? And that comes from the losses and the wins. And to us as a band individually, you know, we're completely different than the band next door.
Totally.
Yeah.
So.
And so, Joe, we're shift away from that for a second.
Talk about me.
Yeah. Formula One driver, professional athlete. I'm trying to think of the top. Frontman for a band is one of those things, I think. And do you think of yourself as a traditional frontman, or are you just one of the guys? How does it feel to be there must be some sort of thing that clicks into your ego, and how did you sort of, what was the metamorphosis from music to I want to be the front guy for this band?
I mean, it's funny. I didn't even audition to be in the band to be the front man.
Really?
You know what I mean? It kind of fell in my lap, but like, like not to sound, I don't know, quote unquote cocky, but it came really naturally, to be honest. Like once you're on stage, and I think I speak for all the boys, once you're on stage, it's a part of you. It's like an extension of yourself. It's almost a different person, but it's still a part of you. It's that drive, you know, like that center of attention that everyone kind of has. You know, kids, they're always grabbing the parents' attention. It's that part of you comes out on stage.
Right.
So I think everyone can be a front man. It's just how far into that, you know, personality do you want to dive into? So, you know.
So when you were a kid, you heard a tune. Were you in front of the mirror with like a prop or something?
I was constant. Singing is huge in my family.
Okay.
But it was almost singing is more of a comedic thing in my family. You know, my dad's singing opera upstairs as a joke. But like now that I think about it and I think back, I'm like, man, I could hit some high notes just joking around.
Yeah.
And I never realized it until I was put in the situation where it's like, can I do this? Can I be the front man of a band? And I mean, you got to take every opportunity as it comes. And thankfully, it came really naturally.
Yeah.
That's the first show we did, 2015 or something like that.
Yeah.
Strawberry Fest. You might have been there. You might have been there.
I couldn't tell you any of the details, but I think I was there.
For sure. It just comes, and I think we all feel that way. It just once you're on stage, that personality comes out of you full fold, man.
And Joe did such a good job at the Strawberry Fest. That was the first gig we ever did, June 2015.
It's the first time I ever sang in front of a crowd.
And I remember my dad, who's brutally honest after every show, and he's, he's such a huge fan and supporter of the band. And I had an old band before we met Joe, and the singer wasn't nearly as strong. And I remember my dad always saying, "Oh, this guy's pitchy. And then we did the Strawberry Fest, and Joe was singing. And I remember getting a call from my dad. He didn't stay for the gig. He had to go somewhere. And he calls me, and he's like, you need to keep that fucking singer in this band. He's absolutely killed
That's
it.
awesome.
Don't get rid of him. Keep this guy. Okay. Well, my dad says
terrific.
That's
yeah.
awesome, man.
Oh, that's great.
Just a natural.
It's fun. Thank you, man.
Good. And Jake, I know a couple times now during just the few minutes we've been talking, you seem to light up when we talk about the commercial aspect of music. And so if we were to just in an impromptu setting do your resume, your CV, would you list entrepreneur as a skill?
I think at this point, yeah. When we started at 18 years old, we did this because we strictly loved music and we wanted to do whatever we could to make it to that stadium success, and we're still on our way to doing that. But we never thought of it through the lens of entrepreneurship right when we started. I would say after we were contacting people and ended up being our own agent, our own publicist, our own contract negotiator for shows, we realized, geez, this is no different than any other entrepreneurial endeavor. And our craft and product that we're servicing to people is music. And I think to all the music people who are going to be watching this, because I know there will be, they might look at that through a skeptical lens, and there might be a negative connotation associated with that, because there are purists who think, make the music and everything else is going to come. Well, I'm not sure what reality they're living in, and unless you have some super in-depth connection, like somebody deep in the LA scene or something like that. We're geographically dispositioned by being in Windsor, Ontario. So we've had to take on all that extra responsibility ourselves. And if we didn't look at it through an entrepreneurial endeavor, I think that would be irresponsible as musicians.
Interesting. And yeah, it's the geographical point that you just made is interesting one, and it leads into my next sort of topic. I know you guys spent 6 months or so. Was it in 2017? Or
was that?
In Toronto?
In Toronto?
Yeah.
Six months in Toronto?
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Like 2017.
And just describe how that was and sort of the rationale behind going up there and then the reasons for maybe coming back.
Yeah. Joe.
Oh, I mean, what I will say about Toronto is Toronto really was the like jumping off point for us creatively.
Yes.
Like being in that, we were together 24 hours a day. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money, so going out during the day, we didn't really do. We wrote all day.
Yeah.
Go to your room, write a song. Like that really got us in the groove creatively. And I think without that Toronto move, like I'm very thankful for it because of that. Like we really fell into our own there.
Yeah, so we were writing together during the day and living in a house. You could argue, well, you could have lived anywhere and done that. But Toronto in particular is the most competitive music scene in Canada, which isn't saying that much in terms of the world competition. If you go to the States, there's so much talent. And in Canada, just by the fact that it's small, there's going to be less. But in Toronto, that was the most competitive place. So we'd go out doing open mic nights and we'd see some talented folks and some really, really good songs. So when we'd go back to our little house that night in our little shack where we wrote the music, we were forced to sort of push ourselves to write better material and be as brutally objective about what we were writing as possible. So I think that was a big part of it. And we went there because it's the LA of Canada. I don't think anybody would deny that. But one thing that happened while we were there, and the reason we didn't stay there longer, is because when we were there, we were developing our social media all the while. And then something happened where we figured out how to market our songs properly. And all of a sudden, we were reaching fans in Germany, Denmark, Romania, US, Mexico, Philippines, all over the place, to the point where we were making some significant money off of that. And we decided, well, gee, we ultimately don't want to end up being one of those Canadian bands, and I'll say it, and because I don't mean it in a bad way, but the Tragically Hip, where they're ultimately successful in Canada only. They're huge in Canada, but nobody knows them in the States. We felt if we were to stay in Toronto and keep pursuing the Canada thing, that we would risk being pigeonholed to being a Canadian band, and we did not want that to happen. So that, in combination with our social media following taking off, we decided, let's relocate back to Windsor, save the rent expense, and start looking down south, pursuing Detroit, Ohio, Chicago, and opportunities like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. It makes total sense as well. You guys have the unique fortune, I guess, to be located in a city where you reach your arm out and you touch Detroit,
surrounded by everything,
and you have the ability to work there legally. And you're not going out there like a refugee or something. You know, just straggling around from bar to bar trying to get cash gigs. But and I want to pursue this a little bit further with you guys. First, Jake, I want to ask, or to both of you, really, I mean, it's almost an unfair question. Can you discern the American palette for your music versus the Canadian palette for your music from your fans?
Very good question. Wow.
I gotta think for a second.
I think so personally. In terms of
it may be too nuanced. I don't. I wouldn't expect you to have a straight answer. But
so one thing I'm learning about, especially in the Detroit music scene, they love heavy rock music with serious subject matter.
In general.
Yeah, Michigan in general, and I think a lot of places in the States, in Chicago also particularly, they love that kind of sound. When we went to Toronto, it was a lot of indie pop music.
That's
and
true.
There's sort of a more eclectic taste. Like, I'm a massive Nickelback fan, and I always get ripped on all the time for it. They're sort of, most people's guilty pleasure, and the ramen noodle hair of Chad Kroger. I love them. But Nickelback isn't a critic's darling. A critic's darling is a band like Radiohead or Arcade Fire. They get that sort of love, and I notice in Canada there's a little bit of that. I'd say more so than in the States, to be honest with you. So in terms of like the stylistic difference and maybe the culture that affects that, I do notice Canadians have a more eclectic. Like when I hear a song, I can usually pinpoint if it's Canadian, right?
I knew you were gonna say
I hear
that.
the Sheepdogs or Monster Truck or Tragically Hip, and I go, yeah, that sounds Canadian. But if I hear a Weeknd song or Drake, it sort of sounds American to me in a weird way, even though it is Canadian.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's on target with sort of what
no,
you're
it
at.
is. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And just to close out on sort of the geography and moving around, is there any future plan? Would you guys consider, if the opportunity was right, to maybe set up shop in North American city like Chicago or LA? And the reason I ask is, I guess if you're in finance, let's say I just pick on finance.
Yeah.
If you're in finance, if you're in trading or banking, you want to be in New York,
Right?
And not just because it's there, but if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, sort of thing. Is that true? Does that hold true? You think in music? I guess you could get critical acclaim doing it from anywhere, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the hip or
Sure,
whoever. But unless do you guys, would you feel? I don't know what the correct word is.
A better advantage by being somewhere like that.
Unfulfilled, let's say, if you didn't do a 1-year stint in one of those
In
cities,
LA or
in
New York
LA
like
or-
that.
yeah.
I mean, I think if the opportunity's there, we're always down. We've talked about it multiple times. Like we're ready.
So this is another secret we're gonna reveal to all the Nitty Gritty fans.
Secret.
Yeah.
But we've been toiling for many months about relocating to a place like LA, which is the hub of music. Like you mentioned, New York, finance. LA is entertainment, acting, comedy, music. So we've certainly been toiling over that. It'd be much easier to have a really strong prospective opportunity lined up remotely so that we can get there and have a better sense of direction as to where to go. But at the same time, if that doesn't come, within the short future, obviously everything's pushed back with Corona. But if that doesn't happen in the short future, we'd certainly not rule that out of the question.
That's
No,
great.
We're ready for any opportunity like that. So
Nice. And from what I understand, you guys have already had some practice out on the road. Back in, was it late 2016 that you guys got onto a tour bus and did the Live Different
tour.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
4-month tour.
And talk a little bit about that and how was
yeah.
that experience? Because I think, it was the first time you guys were away from home and then the first time that you're with each other for such a prolonged
That
period
was,
of time.
yeah.
Right.
Talk
It
about
was
that experience.
I loved it. I loved being on the road and stuff like that. And for a lot of us, it was the first time we've seen other provinces. Like I've never been to BC. Maybe I think you might have.
Manitoba.
But it really grew. I love that tour too because it really grew our like performing chops.
Yeah.
Like
Nice.
we got tight as a band, man.
Yeah,
we tight every day.
As musicians on stage and off stage, that was a big one. There's so many life lessons learned from that tour. I had just quit school. I'm 19 years old. I had a relationship for 2.5 years where the person said, I'll always be there, always be there.
Yeah.
Then we found out we're getting this 4-month, very difficult, nobody, even at the biggest superstar
4
level,
months
tours
straight.
for 4 months
Yeah.
straight. That is unheard of.
Not going home.
Taylor Swift doesn't go out for 4 months without seeing home. We did not go home once.
That's incredible.
And so, I had the relationship end that I never thought was going to end. All these things going into this tour. And then we have 4 young guys full of piss and vigor, which we still are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going out there sexually frustrated, but we're also going, gee, are we going to be able to get along? This is a real test because we'd only been a band for a year at that point. And it turns out I can't even think of one bump in the road while we're there.
That's
we
awesome.
don't argue. Like
That's
we just
so
don't.
rare.
It's a Canadian in us, probably. That's so great.
No, it's awesome. I think you really, this is an old saying, but you don't really know someone until you travel with them. I think you find out a lot when you travel with people.
We learned a
amazing
lot
that-
about each other.
No, so any good story? I mean, you guys got to spill the beans here. I mean, and it doesn't even have to be PG. You know.
Oh, let's go. Yeah, we can swear. We got full
can
rights.
swear.
Absolutely.
What
So
did we do?
yeah,
we did
don't.
a lot of shit, man.
If people out there listening are offended, this is the wrong broadcast.
This
or
is the Nitty Gritty.
podcast for you.
We get into it.
We're gonna say some offensive things, and probably usually from my mouth. It doesn't reflect on the guests or anything, but and we won't apologize for it. And you can save your hate comments for Don Lemon or any of the other losers that are on CNN. But sorry, I just get in there. Sorry, guys. So any good stories from the road? Anything that
Any good
you guys
stuff? We
wanted
did
to
a lot. We climbed a mountain one time.
Shit, I was driving this school bus, right? Everybody's sleeping.
Okay.
And I cannot believe this ever happened. We're in the middle of Saskatchewan. There's nothing nearby. It's like 10 at night. I fucking ran out of gas.
Diesel bus.
Diesel bus. Oh shit! I didn't look at the gas that was totally empty. And I had to pivot off to the side of the road. We called some guy, Frank's One Stop Shop. Fucking
Yeah, we were stuck for like 4 days.
stuck. Yeah.
No, the other time, remember we got the maps just took us on this crazy route.
Maps, yeah.
Google Maps, and we were driving. Tibor, our bass player, amazing driver. We were honestly driving like on the side of a mountain or like in hills. Remember that? The roads, like I don't know if you've ever been to Italy or anything like that. The roads are very narrow and the turns are tight. And he's driving this bus, and we have no idea where we're going. You were a little frightened.
Oh, I hate not.
You were a little
I hate
scared.
not being the one driving. That's
I was
such a
laughing because
personal
I mean
quirk.
that's kind of funny, but you could honestly see down the hillside. Like if there was a turn where it snagged the wheel, man. Woo!
But so one of the most interesting stories. I don't know if this is crazy, but I would say in a way it is. We were driving to a place called Fort St. John. It was Fort Nelson, and on the way was Fort St. John,
This is the
BC.
Yeah.
Nearing Alaska.
I've been to Fort St. John, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, there's a big gas plant up there. I went,
Fun place,
Wow.
right?
It's like
fun is the word, Joe.
Hey, so we're driving, and again, Tibor's driving, and we're sitting there, we're all just having fun, whatever, drinking our coffee. It's freezing, and like toes are numb.
You have to wear a
right? We're
coat on the bus,
On the
yeah.
bus, we're in a coat. All have our headphones in, and all of a sudden, an Autumn King song comes on. We have the aux cord there, so I figured, okay, Devil in Disguise is playing through. Tibor's putting it on to pump our own tires and raise the team spirit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, watch that. Well, I'm like, what? Just like totally nonchalant. I'm like, watch that be like on the radio right now. That'd be crazy, right?
Joke. Everyone thought he was playing a joke.
And
on us.
it's loud on the bus, so Tibor couldn't really hear us chit chatting in the back. And then I walked up to Tibor and I'm like, "Yo, you got Devil in Disguise plugged in the aux, right?" He's like, "What? What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking."
He
I'm
thought
like,
we had it plugged into
he's
the
like,
aux.
"No, you have it plugged in the aux." I'm like, "Dude, stop playing my game. Stop effing around." No, we don't. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Well, we'll see at the end. But maybe after the song is done, we'll hear some sort of radio announcement. All right? Ha ha, how funny would that be? Lo and behold, right? Driving. That was Autumn Kings on 101.5 The Bear. We're all jumping up.
That was the crazy. We were in the middle of nowhere.
19
man.
years old in the middle of nowhere, as far from home as you could possibly be. We're approaching Alaska, freezing in the middle of winter, right? All these things just happened. The dropping out of school, quitting our jobs, girlfriend breaking up, and we're like fucking in the middle of nowhere.
It was like
and
a middle
our
tour
song,
too, yeah.
our song "Devil in Disguise" comes on the radio at 19 years old. I'm like, that is incredibly surreal. So immediately located, used our data.
Yeah.
Probably went way over the bill, and called the radio station. And said, "Well, who was it that played this song?" And they gave us the name. The next day we get to Fort Nelson. Some of their colleagues happen to live in Fort Nelson. We ended up meeting up with them. But like, think of how far away that is from where we are right now in the Windsor, Detroit area.
It was just surreal, man.
That
It
was
really
the most, and that was the ultimate validation, not only to ourselves but to people around us.
I was going to say, yeah, that must be an incredible. I mean, you sacrificed obviously so much, and you obviously, or maybe not so obviously. I don't know. Maybe you got homesick at some point. You started missing home. I mean, there were some relationship issues, which I'll get to that in a minute too.
Sure.
But that's got to be an incredibly. It gives you a little bit more inertia to finish it right. To like,
It was amazing.
we're not doing this for nothing. I actually exist here in the world.
Right.
I travel for a living too, and it's really interesting. Sometimes, when you're especially when you're alone. I mean, you guys at least had each other. But when you're traveling alone, sometimes you almost, it's going to sound really bizarre, but you almost question your own, like, am I actually here? Am I, like, does anybody...
You travel so much,
Hello,
right? Where am I right now?
Yeah. That's happened a few times too, where I've had to actually go to the window and look outside. Oh, this is Chicago.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
That's
I'm here.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's great. And you guys finished that up, and you probably learned a lot and spoke, interacted about how you could make the band better, more commercially viable, et cetera, et cetera. If you jog your memory here, so back then, what would you classify yourselves as? What kind of band did you have? Was it rock? Was it like what
At that
genre?
time?
Yeah, what genre were you representing at that time?
It's a hard rock band.
Rock band, yeah.
We were
Rock
hard
band
rock.
for sure.
Traditional
Yeah.
hard rock band.
Like
Bass, drums, guitar,
Stone Temple
front
Pilots.
yeah.
You know, Avenged Sevenfold, Metallica, like just a heavy rock band.
And that's obviously a setup question because I know you guys were like Jake, you know, I remember you playing in your early teens. I mean, some incredible Metallica riffs. I know that's where your sort of musical roots come from.
Yeah.
And then I listened to the song Echo, which is your latest. And it's almost like it's an incredible transformation or musical journey. It's incredibly nuanced music, Echo, and yeah, it's a phenomenal tune. And what would you consider yourselves now? What genre would you cover?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So we've sort of shifted, and like I mentioned earlier, we used to write starting with the guitar, and that's probably the Metallica that you were referring to coming out of me, the influence. And now we're really focused on writing catchy melodies and words. So Echo is one of those where we tried to blend the two, the best of guitar riffs and the best of writing catchy melodic songs. But I'd say if you had a globe that you were looking at, and you had the north and the south, and you had the equator, and the north was pop, and the south was rock, I think we're walking that fine line. We're right in the middle, especially with a song like Echo. It's got the pop hooks, but it still has this appeal to the badass.
Some heaviness to it,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Somewhere right in between.
Sure.
No, it's so many. There's so many layers to the song. It's really well done. I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke.
Thank you.
And you know what? You guys know me outside of this. You know, I don't want to make this like some big secret that I just bumped into you guys at some fucking coffee shop. We know each other. I consider you friends. I love you guys.
I love you
and
too.
so take it the right way. You know, I'm never going to bullshit you. I'm going to tell you if I don't like something, I just say it. But that song is right on. It's very, very good. I encourage everybody to go find you guys. And while I'm talking about that, just tell everybody where to find you guys.
Oh man, Autumn Kings Band on Instagram, Twitter. If you type in Autumn Kings on Facebook, you'll see it pop up right away. And for any music platforms like Spotify, Apple Music,
Everywhere.
simply type in Autumn Kings
YouTube,
and boom, you get it.
videos.
YouTube, same thing. You get everything you need.
Perfect segue. Another perfect segue into another topic: social media. The probably a love-hate relationship with it.
Absolutely.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. But you guys can tell me. And Jake and I spoke about this, Joe, probably about 6-8 weeks ago or something. We were talking about when I had the first inkling that we wanted to do this podcast. We talked about social media a little bit, and it was coming from my perspective, something that I did or caught myself doing. So scrolling through YouTube, I forget what it was. It was some song from somebody. And, I listened to about 18 seconds of it and just click the thumbs down button, and that's about
Done
it.
with it, yeah.
And then I thought to myself, and maybe people have these thoughts all the time, and I'm just a Gemini, is self-absorbed that doesn't think about it. But I thought, God, I just probably dismissed in a stroke 6 months worth of work that's this guy put in.
Right.
And how do you guys condition yourselves? Because I know you love your music. You're obviously hardworking. You've dedicated your life. This is going to be your career. How have you conditioned yourselves to deal with the negativity and the stupidity that we find on social media?
Great question.
Laugh.
Yeah.
We just kind of laugh. You can't take, it's just like water off a duck's back for us, for all of us. You can't take that stuff personally, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's two sides to it that I have to be honest with you about. There's one where it's the fans going, or I shouldn't say fans, haters watching going, this
Listeners,
is generic, washed up bullshit. That, I promise you, with everything in me, that does not offend me in the slightest. I laugh at it.
Exactly.
And if anything, it actually creates more engagement because hate is a stronger emotion than love. So when somebody from the outside who's unsure of this band sees an ad come up on their Facebook and they see all these hate comments, they actually want to know what the hate is about more than if they just saw, I love this, I love this, I love this. Why are people hating this? They click it, and maybe they won't admit it out into the ether, but they'll think to themselves internally, oh, damn, this is actually really freaking good.
Yeah.
And in secret, they'll use their word of mouth and they'll show their friends and family about it. Yeah. So in that respect, it's worked to our advantage. But the second point, the one that's a little bit hard to take, and I'm just going to be forthright because it'd be so easy to say, oh, nothing bothers. The one thing that's bothersome is when people misconstrue a band on the come up doing everything ourselves and the confidence and enthusiasm we have when they misconstrue it as being arrogance. That is the one thing that is sort of a little tough for me to digest, because then it becomes less about the merits, the artistic merits, and your subjective opinion. If you think it's generic, okay, fine, whatever. Like, what are we gonna do? Everyone has their own opinion. That's fair. But when it crosses into the line of character attacks and character assaults, that's something that's been a little bit tougher to digest. And for those reasons, I'll be frank. We try to really keep a low profile personally on our socials and have it be Autumn Kings that people focus
on the
on.
band. Yeah, for sure.
That's great. And the other thing I wanted to ask you guys about was, we spoke a little bit before we started here today about our backgrounds, and just sort of being multicultural. All of us, either our parents were born in the old country, or one of the parents was born in the old country, and both of you have incredibly diverse musical background in terms of your cultures. Have you gotten into touch with that part of your culture, of the musical part?
Yeah. Well, for me, it'd be Italian music. I'm full Italian. Like, dad was born in Italy and everything like that. And I think, if I really think about it, it definitely comes, if you listen to Italian music, it's all like loud. It's all, you're dancing when you hear it. It's very energetic. And I think it does come from that. I remember like parties when I was a kid, someone's out with an organ or like going nuts, and just that feeling of that pump up music, even though it is Italian from an old man in a basement, it still pumps you up. And I think I still get that feeling when we write our own music.
It's really interesting, Joe, that you mentioned that. And I have access to all of the Italian channels. I have this
good stuff on there.
I have this device that I just won't go into it, but I get a lot of TV from a lot of places. And I think the Italians, I have about 8 dedicated channels to variety, to musical variety. It's incredible how much music they put out, and they really have like a broad spectrum of music that they put out. So that's obviously a big part of the culture, right?
Music is huge in Italian culture. If you don't know how to play an instrument, you're almost like, how do you not know? Like, how do you not know how to play the accordion? Or like, if you're not picking up a tambourine, like, come on. You got to be involved. I think so.
Interesting. Jake,
we're Macedonian, and obviously I'm half Macedonian and half Lebanese. So you really get some nice,
there's some
diverse culture there. And at Lebanese weddings, you do a dance called the dubka. And it's high energy, and people are banging this huge drum, and they're doing this dance. So that spirit, while admittedly it's very tough to capture that in its rawest form and channel it into something that's American and palatable to the American mainstream. But taking just little tidbits, we have a song called If I Leave Today, and the bridge of that song after the second chorus, we throw in a nylon guitar and we play almost this, not to get too technical for the fans here, but this Arabic kind of sounding scale. But we do it in a way that still sounds like American rock and roll. So in that way, it actually does influence the way we write in little ways.
That's fascinating stuff. That's
cool.
So we're now, you've released the song Asshole, and maybe before I get to that's a setup question for something else that I want to ask you. So talk about where Asshole came from, the inspiration. You can say your Uncle Larry. It's okay. I'm 100% we mad at you.
150%. Been going up around, No. So Asshole was interesting. A lot of times, like I mentioned earlier, we pick up an instrument and we'll just start saying random words. And one thing while we were writing one day was, I'm an asshole. Yeah, I'm an asshole. The rest of the song was, like, lyrically, none of it was cohesive. It was all about different stuff. We brought it to our producer, Marty, and said, what do you think of this? He said, I love the I'm an asshole part, and I think you should take that and make an entire song out of it. I said, oh, seriously? Let's go. So all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, let's just make this as sensational and ridiculous as possible. So we just kept coming up with silly line to silly line. Nothing wrong with the text and the drive. Won't say sorry. You can say it for me. Suck my motherfucking dick. All this crazy shit.
That is a line in the song.
I really think, and the thing that drove us to take that song to the finish line was it's a very sort of politically correct culture, and to the point where comedians are even getting, it's called cancel culture, right?
Yeah.
They get canceled for making jokes. Comedians can't go out there and entertain and speak freely. And I thought this could be a nice song. It's certainly an outlier song for Autumn Kings. We don't usually make stuff like that. But to shake things up a little bit and have some fun and have something totally satirical, that was really the inspiration for Asshole. Totally. And have we ever had more fun in the studio than making that song?
Never.
Oh, that's
the
great.
laughs and like
we were laughing the entire time.
The things we just let go.
Oh, we said some
song,
stupid.
Man.
You told me about. One of the things that I found, like off the outside of the podcast, you told me the story about the gym you know, in a not so great area of Detroit where you guys were doing the
I
filming.
actually wasn't there. Jake was there.
That's brutal.
Brutal.
We got
Sounds fun, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. People were definitely packing in there. It was like I talked to the guy. I talked to the guy at the gym who was letting us in. I'm like, how's like if we kept our guitars in the car, is that okay? He's like, yeah, you should be good. It's just you got to be careful when you're out of the car and walking to the front door. That's when like all the bad stuff happens. I'm like, oh, so in other words, I'm walking into the gym and I have a risk of, but no, I mean, we love Detroit, right? We love it. We cut
absolutely.
But no, his asshole is just, there's a lot of Easter eggs in that song too, where if you listen closely, like some stuff that we're saying in the background, is it's pretty funny.
It's an awesome song. I've listened to it incessantly, and it makes me laugh every time. And so I'm going to shift a little bit here. So you made a parody. I'll use the song as just sort of a springboard. So you did a bit of a parody song, or sort of just to goof around a bit, maybe you know, blow off some steam from other things that you guys are doing day to day. And so you go back to your CV of music, or all of your creativity throughout the years. And you know, I couldn't get through this podcast or any conversation without referencing Led Zeppelin, so I'm going to do it here.
Let's do it.
And so I read and devour all things Led Zeppelin all the time, and I have it programmed into my phone, like when the news stories come up. So Robert Plant has said this a million times. It's the reason why you don't see any Led Zeppelin concerts. He said, I did something from the time I was 19 and it ended when I was 30. It was a project. I'm done with that project. And his body of work outside of Led Zeppelin is much bigger, much more critically acclaimed. Maybe hasn't sold as many records.
He won a Grammy.
Yeah. I think several of them with Alison Krauss. I think several of them, you know, somebody can do a fact check. Anderson Cooper, you can do a fact check on this. If it was Alison Krauss that he won a couple of Grammys with. And so he's got a big body of work, but he says, look, this project was 11 years long. I had a great time, but it's not going to define me. Autumn Kings, is it a project? Or maybe it's an unfair question. Maybe you can't even answer it. You can tell me. Is it a project with a definite ending or something else? Is it?
That's a big. I think you hit the nail on the head. It may be too early to tell, but I see this band in my future. Maybe speaking, I don't want to speak for everyone else. Through the long haul, I don't think it's a project itself. A part of my life, a huge part of my life. But to see an end to an Autumn Kings, I don't see that, I guess. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, and I think this is what I was getting at. It was the tougher way of asking you, are there shiny things out there in the musical ether that intrigue you outside of Autumn Kings?
For sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I have a couple cuts with other artists that I write songs for, particularly songs that I'm writing music every day. So not every single thing I write is going to feel like it's a perfect match for something Autumn Kings does. I looked at that as a side dish. That's something like, oh yeah, I'll do that whenever I have time. It's certainly not the priority. I'll say this much, and I've said it a couple years ago, and I'll say it again because I mean it 150%. I will never play in another band again. 150%. I have absolutely zero interest because I found Tibor, we found Joe, and these are guys that we have, to me, just an uncomparable chemistry compared to other artists. So I have no interest in joining another band. I could see this band happening until we die. That is the goal. It's always been the goal. I hope it always will be. I will ultimately write for other artists still, and that's something that interests me for sure, but it would never be the priority to this. This is always the number one.
Yeah, that's a great way to answer it.
You know, and other people are.
I mean, I think we're such creative people to say like just this project is the only thing we'll ever do. I mean, that isn't fair. I know Jake writes for other people and stuff like that, but I think Autumn Kings is around for a long time. That's definitely safe to say.
That's awesome, guys. Listen, I think that's the appropriate way to end things. As a perfect note to put a conclusion on this, the maiden recording of the Nitty Gritty. Thank you so much for joining me today and helping me with this.
Fun, man.
The immense help. It was awesome.
Our pleasure.
You know, hopefully we'll get you guys. I don't know where this thing is going to go. Really, who knows? I hope it does well. If this was the only one, fucking A.
Yeah.
If not, good. And I'll just say it right now. If somebody can help us book like Vladimir Putin or Lady Gaga for number 2, it'll only be 2. We'll just end it right there.
I think you got a hell of an interviewer voice persona. So congrats again on the podcast.
Yeah,
It's
appreciate
a lot of fun.
it, guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you. And, I think, based here in Southwestern Ontario, there's so many great stories. You guys are just like a breath of fresh air, and it's always things that intrigue me. I think there's nothing really special about me. Things that intrigue me intrigue a lot of people. Hustling, people that hustle, the backstory to all these. I don't think because somebody's famous or achieved a status level in society that their story is any more interesting on a like-for-like basis than anybody else's. I think the people next door to you may have an incredible story. They just need a forum to tell it. And I think that was part of the reason why I wanted to do this. And hopefully we get to do a few more. And to all of you people, and Joe's one of them that do podcasts on a regular basis. Joe, do you want to plug your podcast?
Check out the 4 Below podcast on all your streaming services. Yeah, that's my podcast.
Awesome. So I hope I did all of you people that do podcasts on a regular basis I gave you the proper respect. We're figuring things out here. Take it easy on the comments. We're just trying to figure stuff out. And again, direct your hate mail to CNN. Okay, that's all we got for you today. Thanks again, guys.
Coming, I don't stop, run and grab a gun and get ready for war. Screaming like a psycho.